Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining PHCA for today's webinar, Workplace Harassment and Cultural Sensitivity. I'm Wendy Johnson with the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. PHCA offers monthly webinars to members to receive updates from department staff on regulations, learn from industry experts on current trends and practices, and to gain a better understanding of practical application tools to equip you so that you may continue to provide the highest level of quality care possible. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the PHCA website. The webinar has been approved for 1 continuing education credit for PHCA members. Credits will be uploaded to NAB within the next 2 weeks for those who have provided us with your unique NAB number. I'll be sending a link to a quick survey. Your feedback is very important to us and to our speaker, so please take a moment to complete the survey. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. However, throughout the presentation, please feel free to submit questions using the questions pane on the right hand of your screen, and our speaker will address them. Now for today's webinar. This webinar is being presented by Lisa Bellis, Managing Director, Risk Management at Brown & Brown of the Lehigh Valley. Today's webinar will provide an insight into Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and other laws regarding workplace harassment, hostile work environment, and bullying. Lisa will discuss personal protected characteristics and the importance of respecting differences in beliefs and perceptions. I'll now turn the webinar over to Lisa.
Good morning, everybody. As Wendy had said, my name is Lisa Bellis. I work at Brown & Brown out of our Lehigh Valley office located in Bethlehem. And there's a couple of things about this course that I'd like to start with. First of all, I want to make sure everyone's aware I'm not legal counsel. I have not passed a bar. I am not an attorney. This course is a risk management course. So the whole goal of today is to make sure that we show you the techniques so that you can avoid a harassment lawsuit or a hostile work environment lawsuit or even a bullying lawsuit. So it's not how to successfully defend. Sometimes we have attorneys sit in on these types of courses and they may argue, well, I could defend that. Once it gets to an attorney, you've already spent money. The minute it lands on the attorney's desk, the clock starts ticking and we already start racking up a bill. So this is a proactive course. In this course, we're also going to review a couple of cases for hostile work environment. Now, I want you to keep in mind, these cases were already litigated, they were already settled, so I already know the outcome. So whether or not another attorney feels that they could successfully argue it or argue against it is completely irrelevant. Again, this is designed to minimize the potential for a lawsuit, and so that's where we're going to focus today. All right, I love these guys. These are Mythbusters. I'm sure many of you have seen this program in the past, and we're going to start the course by busting some myths. The first myth is most sexual harassment is just harmless flirting. And we may think that, but flirting is a mutually consensual behavior, and both parties actually have to agree to engage in the interaction. So if one person finds this other person's behavior offensive and the behavior persists, that would constitute sexual harassment. The second myth is only women are sexually harassed. That is completely false. So while most sexual harassment is perpetrated by men against women, you are going to see, even in the cases that we're going to be discussing today, it could be a woman against a man against a man, or a woman against a woman. The third mythbuster is an employee must intend to offend for it to be harassment. We are going to drill down on this today because a claim for hostile environment or sexual harassment does not require proof of intent. So many people who are accused of harassment, they actually believe that their behavior is funny or that, that it's attractive to other people. But some people even believe that it might be welcoming to the people. But if it's the intention is completely irrelevant. It's all how someone perceives it. The fourth and final myth is a single isolated act can never violate harassment laws. And while persistent pervasive behavior, we're going to discuss the definition of that, is usually required in a court of law before a workplace becomes legally hostile. If there is a single severe physical act or threatening behavior, it could be extremely offensive words. We're going to see some case examples that show one single severe isolated act that actually was defined as and ruled as the court as being a hostile work environment. So a single act can be enough in some instances. All right, I love this woman personally. Many people might think that she is a feminist or someone who is an active defender of women's rights. I call her an equalist because she defends both men and women. And so let's look at some statistics. Number one is that females have a 3 in 5 chance of being sexually harassed in the workplace. Males, you still have a chance, 1 in 5 chance of experiencing sexual assault. Now, what's interesting is that 80% of those who are harassed, whether they're men or women, they just never report it. We're going to find out exactly why this takes place. 75% of the victims experience retaliation. Could that have something to do with why people aren't reporting it? You better believe it. The next thing is more than half of the people who are perpetrators are high-ranked individuals. These are people in positions of authority. It could be managers, owners, supervisors, someone who has authority over another employee. The next thing is behavior can be harassing even if it isn't aimed at the victim. What does this mean? You could be standing at the water cooler or the Keurig in your office and telling really what you think to be a very funny joke and not even talking to the person. But if someone walks into that area and actually hears the joke and is offended by the joke, that could be considered harassing. Doesn't have to be aimed at the victim. And last, 1 in 5 workers face a hostile or threatening work environment. We're going to define exactly what a hostile or threatening work environment is in a little bit. All right, let's talk about Title VII. We're not going to get completely involved in legal terms and stuff, but we're all familiar with this. This is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it prohibits discrimination. We're going to talk in the next slide about what defines protected personal characteristics. Now, this is what I think is really interesting, is this applies only to those employers with 15 or more employees. And when I saw this, I had to think to myself, well, what about if I'm an employee and I work for an employer and there's only 10 employees? That's not really fair. Well, it was designed that way in the beginning because they didn't want to burden smaller businesses with so many regulations. So it was designed with 15 or more. At some point in time, is it possible that there can be an amendment to this and it can apply to all employers regardless of the number of employees? Absolutely. All right, let's take a look at those personal characteristics. I'm going to throw a question out there, and if you can use your question bar to answer back, I won't be able to see the results, but Wendy certainly will, and she can kind of give us some of the results that are taking place. If you guys could each type in some of what you think to be a personal characteristic that is protected under Title VII, what do you guys think? And Wendy, if you'll, as they come in, just let us know what kind of responses we're getting.
You bet.
I'll just give this a few minutes. So what do you guys think are the personal characteristics protected by Title VII? I know I can think of a handful off the top of my head without bringing them up on the screen. Any answers, or am I stumping everybody?
Stumped everybody. We have on age and sex.
There we go. Very good. Age and sex is definite.
Race.
Perfect. We'll wait for 1 or 2 more.
Religion.
You got it. So you guys have named a handful so far. I'm going to throw some out there.
Yep. National origin. Perfect.
You got it. So race, color, sex, religion, national origin, you guys got it. Now, my next question for you guys is, you mentioned age. At what age do you think Title VII begins to protect people? Does anyone have an idea? If you can use that question bar again. I get all kinds of answers on this.
We have 140. See if we get it more.
Let's see who can get this question right.
I think everybody's being shy today.
Okay, that's all right. So that one person, you got it right. If you are age 40 or over, Title VII will protect you. It protects people that are pregnant. It protects sexual orientation. If you have any physical or mental disabilities, gender identity, familial status means whether or not you have children. So those are all the personal protected characteristics. Now, what is harassment? It's any type of behavior at all that causes humiliation, any type of intimidation. This especially happens, the intimidation can happen when you have someone in a position of authority, coercion, any type of discomfort or emotional distress. Now, I'm sure we all heard of quid pro quo. I can't help but think about the Hannibal Lecter movie, Silence of the Lambs, when I see this. It simply means this for that. And it's often, again, those people in positions of authority or power. If you do this, then you'll be able to continue to work here. If you do this for me, then you will be promoted. So that is quid pro quo, and that is one example of a type of workplace harassment. The next is hostile work environment. Now, remember, we talked about severe or pervasive. So the courts do state that in order for a workplace to be deemed a hostile work environment, it has to be a severe act or a pervasive, meaning it's ongoing. It didn't just occur once and done. It's continually happening. Again, there are instances where the courts have ruled that one act was severe enough that it did constitute a hostile work environment. A hostile work environment will affect a person's work environment. Not only their environment, it'll affect their performance. And it will focus on those protected personal characteristics that we just discussed. So what's considered acceptable to one person? I want you guys to really remember this phrase. It's not always acceptable to another. So as far as hugging, I can tell you that I have a variety of clients that I've had different lengths relationships with. So I have clients that I have known for 30 plus years. And when I go out to see them, we might hug one another as a form of a greeting. I have other clients where a handshake will suffice. I have gone out and I have met with, there was one individual, I walked up, it was our first encounter, I put my hand out, I extended my hand for a handshake, and he said, I don't do handshakes, and he kind of formed the knuckle touch, and he leaned back and he said, I'll give you a knuckle touch. So everyone's perception is their reality. It's completely different. Gifts. Gifts can be considered acceptable, but it depends on what type. And so we might have gift cards, which are perfectly acceptable, or cards that are perfectly acceptable. If you're giving a gift card, and this is a real example that I have encountered with one of my other clients. One employee was getting a gift card from an outside vendor for Victoria's Secret. That would be considered inappropriate. Personal space. When I do this training in person, I typically call up 6 volunteers, and I have 2 people stand facing each other about 10 feet apart. And I'll ask them to start walking to meet in the middle and to get as close as they feel comfortable. And you can see with the 3 sets of 2 people walking towards each other, each of them has their own personal space, their own perception about what is acceptable and what is not. Some have gone up to each other and actually embraced each other. Other people were an arm length away, and they're like, stop right there. I don't want you more than an arm length away. Other people got a little bit closer. For me personally, it's about an arm length away before I begin to feel very anxious. Personal space is something that we all have to recognize. I have walked through workplaces where I have seen people leaning over people just to see their computer monitors, and they may place their hand on someone's shoulder and the other hand on the desk and lean over. That would be considered inappropriate. If you're not sure how the person's going to perceive your actions, it's best to allow them that personal space. All right, hostile work environment. Again, the abuse is typically physically threatening or humiliating. The behavior would definitely have to be unwelcome, and we're going to also talk about what is an unwelcomed behavior versus what is considered a welcomed behavior. Hostile work environments, I can tell you, the abuse will interfere with job performance, and it will affect the psychological well-being of an employee. I have seen it. Personally, back many years ago, I worked for an employer. I was one woman who was a producer, a salesperson, in a staff of probably 10 other male sales individuals, and every Monday morning we would have a sales meeting. And at one particular meeting, the president, the owner of the company, said, I need you to attend a contractors meeting at night on Monday night. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm attending courses at night. And he said, Lisa, you have to. You will be the only female at a male-dominant Contractors Association meeting. We need you there so that you can attract the men over, and then once you have a group of men standing around, you can walk away. We'll take it from there. So that was very humiliating because I had been in the business longer than them. I was very competent. I was the number one salesperson, and so that, to me, that whole environment was very hostile. Okay, what constitutes unwelcome behavior? So in order for a behavior, for someone's behavior to be welcome or unwelcome, it has to be offensive to the victim. So the victim, and its perception, it doesn't have to be necessarily your perception, it's the victim's perception that it is offensive. And I bolded the and for a reason, because it has to be both of these. It's not offensive or, it's offensive and unsolicited, unwelcomed. All right, so what are some unwelcome behaviors? I'm sure we can all list 100 different physical unwelcome behaviors. Those are physical touching, assaulting, maybe blocking someone from being able to get out of a room, hugging, kissing, pinching. We could go on and on with this. The verbal would be inappropriate jokes. Maybe you're recounting a funny joke that you thought was funny, that you heard on Howard Stern, or maybe you attended an Andrew Dice Clay, and you're repeating a joke that you heard. It could be a remark or a proposition, cursing, obscenities, any comments can be considered unwelcome behaviors. Visuals, I can tell you that one of the functions of my job is to go out to workplaces and conduct site safety inspections. And very often, and it's not just males, I've seen it in female work areas as well. I have seen cartoons taped up on workstations. I have seen pinup calendars of men and women. So any type of visual that could be offensive, and it can be calendars, drawings, any objects. Those are also. So unwelcome behaviors comes in the physical variety, verbal, as well as visual. All right, so unwelcome behavior. First of all, there has to be evidence that the victim found it unwelcome. So that would include, for example, maybe the victim has walked up on someone recounting a joke. Maybe it's a sexual joke, and the victim says to the harasser, "Stop! Like, I don't want to hear this." Maybe they walked away from the situation. What you need to keep in the back of your mind is, number one, if the victim didn't complain to others, that does not make the behavior welcomed. And even if the victim might at 5 o'clock punch out of work, go down to the local bar, and tell the exact same joke that they found offensive in the workplace, just because they engage in the same type of conduct outside the workplace does not make the behavior inside the workplace a welcomed behavior. I hope that's clear to everybody. All right, so welcomed behaviors. The courts will find that you are welcoming a behavior if you engage in a similar type of behavior inside the workplace. So if you hear an offensive joke and you are trying to say, look, this was an unwelcome behavior, I found it offensive, I didn't want to hear it, but yet you're caught an hour later and you're caught saying the same type of joke, then you're engaging in similar behavior. If you don't want anyone to put their hands on your back or on your shoulder, then you should not initiate physical contact as well. Even laughing at jokes. And I know sometimes we feel as though even if the joke is offensive, we feel that, we have to laugh. If you're found laughing at the joke, that's encouraging it, and that's saying that you've welcomed that type of behavior. So you have to be very careful with your own responses. All right, so the discussion, I'm going to go ahead and typically I'll have a discussion and I'll put questions out there, but I'm going to go ahead and, well, I'm going to let you guys answer. Wendy, so you can let me know what kind of responses we're getting back. Let us know yes or no. Are these situations considered acceptable behavior in the workplace? So asking a coworker to lunch or dinner, yes or no, is that acceptable?
I have a no and I have a yes. We have 2 no's and 1 yes.
Okay. So we're getting a mixed
2 and 2.
Okay, we're getting a mixed bag, and that's perfect because if you ask someone to lunch or dinner and it has to do with work, so you're having like a lunch and learn or you're having a dinner to discuss a client, that's acceptable. It's even acceptable if you decide today, later on, to ask a coworker out on a date to lunch or dinner, you get 1 free pass. And if they say no, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, that is considered unacceptable. And if you continue beyond that first time, once they say no, that is considered harassment. Let's put another one up. How about giving a compliment? Yes or no? Is that acceptable?
Yes.
What do you guys think? Yeah, okay. So again, that's going to depend. So if I gave a compliment and I said, look, you have a very nice tie on today, or I love that blouse, or your hair looks nice, that's probably okay. But if I'm going to say, those slacks, I love the way those slacks hug your body, that is not a behavior that would be acceptable. So again, compliments are acceptable if they're given in the right fashion. Holding the door open, what do you guys think about, is it acceptable for someone to hold the door open for someone else?
So far, lots of yeses.
Okay, good. And that is perfectly fine. What you may not say yes to, and hopefully you don't, is touching someone's waist as they walk through the door. Again, we don't know how that other person's perception will be, so we want to refrain from doing something because everyone's perception is different. So touching someone's waist as they walk through the door, I would caution, I would lead with conservative here, and I would say no, that would not be acceptable. All right, so who are the harassers? They can be coworkers, supervisors, managers, suppliers, vendors, customers, same sex, opposite sex. It can be absolutely anybody, and it does not have to be the coworker. There could be a client that you're dealing with. There could be somebody in your building working on the HVAC system or the plumbing system that, and if they're harassing you, if they are playing like Andrew Dice Clay in the background and you don't want to hear it, those can be very harassing, and it can come from absolutely anyone. Okay, so cultural sensitivity. Number one, as I want you guys to remember, is there's a couple of things I want to say here. Number one, be mindful of any type of consumers or any type of guests that you have within your workplace. So your consumers, their family members, any type of people that you work with. Just think before you speak. That's really what it comes down to, is putting filters on. And remember that your actions represent your organization. So what does that mean? That means that if you are wearing some type of shirt that might be branded with your organization's logo, or you're out there on the field representing your organization, whether it's at a trade show or an educational seminar, your actions represent your organization. So I had an account, and they had a couple of maintenance workers, and they were in uniform, and it had their logo right on their polo shirts, and they were getting a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. So they're there with the shirts on with their employer's name emblazoned on the polo shirt, and they were harassing the young lady at Dunkin' Donuts. And so I was asked to do sexual harassment training for their group of employees, and she said, you have to let them know that it's not just coworkers, it's everyone you encounter, and it's as long as you're representing your workplace. So even though it may not physically be in the box you work in, it could be out on the field. It could be while you're attending these different types of functions on behalf of your employer. All right, who is held responsible? Well, at the end of the day, the employer is held responsible, and the harasser obviously would be held responsible. Intention is definitely not irrelevant. So if you didn't intend to offend somebody, again, it doesn't matter because their perception is their reality, and the employer does not have to necessarily have any awareness of the actions going on. They are held liable for the actions of the people that they employ. All right, we're going to go through some case examples. The first case, this has been tried and settled, is my boss yells at me in front of coworkers. They sabotage my work, threaten my job on a regular basis. One time he left a bullet on my desk as a gift. The guy is completely crazy. I used to be in top management, and now they leave me out of everything to retaliate for my whining about the way they treat me. So we have someone who is humiliating this person and threatening their job, and it's on a regular basis, so we have the persistency, right? A bullet would be considered severe, at least in my mind, a bullet is pretty severe. And we have retaliation, so it is not legal for an employer to retaliate when a situation is reported to them. So this was an example of a hostile work environment. Case number 2, in March 2014, an employee threatened to kill me. I was terminated for reporting this. My unemployment benefits were fought, and my medical benefits were cut off. Again, we have a pretty severe case here. Someone threatened another employee's life. Now, there was a very specific instance. It says in March of 2014, so it seems like it could have been a single isolated act. But in this particular case, it was severe enough that the courts ruled that this was harassment and it was a hostile work environment. And then the employee was terminated, so there was retaliation on the part of the employer, again, illegal. Case number 3, the senior person I worked with, whom I shared an office, would require me to engage in conversations which ended with him expressing hostility to the rights of women and minorities. I am both. I felt unsafe, fearful, nauseous, anxious, and uncomfortable in my own skin. He went to sexual harassment prevention training and returned to continue the behavior. The other women in the office saw what was happening when he chased me into another office in a rage, and I told him to stop. So again, we have someone expressing hostility against protected classes. Remember, gender and race. This person feels unsafe, fearful, nauseous, so she's exhibiting, or he or she is exhibiting all of these symptoms, the physical and psychological symptoms. And then he actually chased this person into an office. Now, the way we know that this behavior was not welcome is that this person told them to stop. So this case was ruled as a hostile work environment and harassing. All right, parental advisory. So I'm going to put a question out there, and this is my own personal opinion, and I want you guys to respond with a simple yes or no on whether you agree with me or not, and it really doesn't matter either way. There's no right or wrong answer, but I'm just going to kind of put it out there. So in general, in today's society, I feel that we as a society, people are more sensitive to a wide variety of topics, like very sensitive. Do you agree with that statement, yes or no?
Okay, answers are coming in. We'll give it another couple seconds.
Sure.
So far, everyone agrees yes.
Okay, good. So like I said, there's no wrong answer, but if you do agree with that statement, it becomes clear that today, more than ever, we really need to be sensitive to each other's differences, and that includes cultural, religious, political, whatever it is, or we find ourselves in a litigious position, and once we're there, we know that we have to defend our actions or our words. So again, it becomes down to proactive, putting that filter on. So I'm going to give you a couple of pictures, and Wendy is going to help me out here. The very first picture is the Christmas tree. And what do you guys think? Yes or no? Yes for acceptable, no for unacceptable for that Christmas tree.
All right, answers are coming in. We'll give it a Another second or two? So far, everyone agrees yes.
Okay, good job, guys. So Christmas trees have been deemed by the courts as secular. Secular simply means it's not tied to any type of religion. What are your thoughts on the cross, the second picture on the right? Yes for acceptable, no for unacceptable.
Again, we'll give it a couple seconds to let answers come in. All right, so far we have a lot of no's. We have one yes, and we have a no, and it depends.
Okay, so let's talk about this one. The cross is actually tied to, it is considered non-secular, it is tied to Christianity, and therefore courts will rule that this is considered a religious symbol. Now, how about the next picture, the I, Star of David, shiksas? Yes for acceptable, no for unacceptable.
All right, answers are coming in. We'll give it another second or two. So far, we have several no's and one yes.
Okay, so on this particular one, the Star of David is a religious symbol for Judaism, and the term shiksas does have somewhat of a negative connotation to the female gender. So this would be something that I would say that proactively you should, if you were to, to consider putting this clock up in your office or in your workplace, I would tend to say leave it at home and put it up in your home work environment. How about the picture of the young...
Lisa, we do have one question coming in.
Sure.
What about menorah?
Again, I'm pretty sure I would have to, I can get back to this person on a separate note if you want to forward me their email or if they want to forward email. But menorah, again, tied to Judaism, so religious.
Okay, thank you.
How about yes or no as far as the young woman on the second picture? Yes, acceptable, what's going on there, or no, not acceptable?
Okay, answers are coming in. We'll give it another second or two. So far, everyone agrees no.
Okay, perfect. And again, that comes down to that personal space that we talked about. And you can just see the stress on her. He might not be able to see the stress that's pictured on her. So again, unwelcome physical contact. And we have two last photos. What about Howard Stern? Yes, acceptable, no, unacceptable.
All right, we'll give it a couple seconds. We have answers coming in. All right, this one has mixed reviews. We have yeses and nos.
And I figured it would. So Howard Stern, I guess it kind of depends what day or what program you catch him on, but he has been known to use obscenities. His jokes are sometimes offensive. And so while, personally, I can take him to a certain extent, and some of his things I find are funny. Other people that I work with might say, you know what, no, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear the obscenities. I don't want to hear a recount of the jokes. So again, being proactive, not recounting anything that you heard on the radio if you've been listening to your Sirius XM radio in the morning. How about Snap-on tools? Yes or no? And I don't know if you guys, so more specifically, Snap-on, they provide tools to different types of trades. And as a part of their promotions to employers to purchase their tools, they have a calendar that comes out annually. And this calendar will have photographs of women, beautiful women, posed sort of scantily, and they're posed with the tools that they sell. I see this a lot when I do my site inspections. So yes, acceptable, no, unacceptable.
After your explanation, we have a lot of no's. We did have some yeses, and now with your explanation of the background on that, we do have a lot of no's.
Perfect. Yeah, I guess just a picture of the truck with not everybody knowing what Snap-on is. So on this particular case, again, it's a visual display of women that they hand out. So, if you get one of those, if you are an employer that would ever use any type of, and it doesn't have to be Snap-on tools, it could be anything. If they're going to give you something that could, be a visual display that would violate any of the personal protected classes or characteristics, you want to sort of leave that at home. Go ahead and take it home with you. All right, how about this? Yes or no? Candy canes, are these acceptable in the workplace?
All right, answers are coming in. We'll give it a couple seconds. So far, everyone agrees yes.
Okay, so you are correct. They are deemed secular, but I will tell you that in Nebraska, this all happened this past December. So a Nebraska elementary school teacher actually sent a memo to all of her school administrators, and she wanted to make sure that there was no Christmas-related imagery appearing in her classrooms or schools. And in the memo, she actually wrote, historically, the shape of the candy cane is a J for Jesus, the red for the blood of Christ, and the white for a symbol of resurrection. She deemed Santa Claus, Christmas trees, reindeer, everything but the color green. Green was okay. Sledding and scarves and Olaf from Frozen, she said, were acceptable. She was actually placed on an administrative leave and then later asked to tenure her own resignation. So candy canes are viewed as being secular. They are not tied to religion. So we're all glad we can enjoy those candy canes around the workplace next year. Now, the next slide that I bring this up because while most of us are aware of children being bullied in schools and on social media, we don't really hear a whole lot about adults being bullied or adults in the workplace being bullied. And so workplace bullying is basically a health-harming mistreatment of your coworkers, and it could be by one or more people. Again, same as the hostile work environment, your abuse can be verbal, it can be threatening, intimidating, humiliating, it could interfere with their work, it could sabotage their work, maybe you're preventing them from getting work done, or even a combination. So I have some statistics. We have over 60 million Americans. These are adults in workplaces that are being bullied. 70% of the perpetrators are men. 60% of the targets are women. Hispanics are the most frequently bullied race, and 61% of the bullies are bosses. Again, those people in those high-powered positions. 29% of targets remain silent. Why? Because the employers are retaliating on this. And the only way to stop it is 65% of them, they don't lose their jobs. They actually quit their original jobs to get out of the environment, which is really a shame. It's a lot of talent leaving. 77% of Americans, when polled, actually supported enacting a law against workplace bullying. So, put some of these up. Again, these are some of the signs of bullying. So for the employer, it defines an abusive work environment. It's intimidating, it's purposeful ignoring, it could be isolation, it could be undermining work, it could be stealing credit. These are all different things that define what would be considered workplace bullying. Now, this is not typically covered under Title VII because in most instances, not every instance, but in most instances, workplace bullying doesn't affect a protected class, although it can sometimes. So there is a bill out there, and this is the whole reason why I bring this up, is that there is a healthy workplace bill. It's referred to as HWB. This is an act, and it addresses bullying and that type of behavior without regard to the class status. So that's the key, without regard to those protected characteristics. And it makes this type of behavior legally actionable, so there can be a lawsuit. And it also makes this type of behavior, it puts vicarious liability on the employer. So for the employer, it defines basically what an abusive work environment is, because first the employer has to know what it even means. It would require proof of health harm by a licensed health or mental health professional, so the victim would have to prove that. And it protects employers from vicarious liabilities as long as they have internal correction policies and procedures developed, prevention mechanisms, ways to report it, and ways to investigate it. Now, it requires plaintiffs to use their own private attorneys, and basically what this law is doing is it's plugging the gaps in state and federal civil right protections. So what does it do for employees? It gives employees who are being bullied an avenue for legal redress. It allows you to sue the bullying individual. It holds your employer accountable. It seeks restoration, so it would seek restoration for your lost wages or any benefits. And it compels your employers to do something about it, to either obviously to prevent it, but if it happens, to correct it. So if you don't currently address this in your employee handbook, this may be something that you want to begin drafting with legal counsel, with an HR specialist, because this bill may shortly become law. And once it becomes law, it would require employers to address and to investigate all instances of this type of bullying. So again, I'm bringing this into the fold specifically because of that. All right, let's talk about some of the effects of all of this stuff we talked about: harassment, hostile work environment, and bullying. On the employee, the obvious, right? Stress and absenteeism. I can tell you that if you're being bullied or if you're being harassed, who wants to come in? You have people calling out of work. They're less productive. I can tell you that in that situation that I recounted in the beginning, where my employer wanted me to go to that contractors association meeting and the behavior continued, I became very depressed, I just didn't want to come in. I was very good. I was the top salesperson, and then all of a sudden I just stopped trying. All of this can lead to physical ailments, to mental disorders such as depression and anxiety, and troubled relationships that you actually take home with you. On the employer, high turnover. Who's going to want to work? You're going to be losing people. Low productivity, all those lost innovations from people who just walk off the job because they don't want to be in that environment anymore. Then you have to defend yourself. So the whole purpose of today's course was so that you could put into place some proactive policies or procedures. Once it gets to the point where you're being sued and someone is paired up with a lawyer, now you have to defend yourself. Now you're incurring those costs. And then your reputation's on the line. Everywhere I go, I recount this story. And so, who would want to go work for that employer that I left because it was such a hostile work environment? You wind up getting a reputation, and then it becomes very difficult to attract and retain those quality employees. So what are your responsibilities? Well, as you must know and understand your company policy, know the law, abide by your company's policy. If you haven't seen it, ask for a copy. Be watchful. Even if the harassing or the hostile work environment is not affecting you, if it's affecting someone else and you're witnessing it, report it. Take action. So if you are comfortable in doing so, confront the harasser. Tell them to stop. Tell them their actions are making you feel uncomfortable. If you're not comfortable in doing that, follow your company's policies and procedures, whatever that is, whether it says to go to the supervisor, director, president. What I love, one of the companies I reviewed their policies or procedures, and they actually had contingencies. So if the harassment is coming from a coworker, they were supposed to report to their supervisor. If the harassment was coming from their supervisor, they were to go to HR. If the HR, then they would go to the president. If it was coming from the president, they were told to go to the board of directors. So having that contingency, because presidents and HR people are human, and they could be the perpetrator. All right, be courteous. Again, it all comes down to thinking before you're speaking. On your own time, when you're not representing your company, you're in your own environment, it's okay to do whatever you want. But in the workplace, while you're representing your organization, don't use the obscenities. Ask yourself, is there any possible way what I'm about to say or what I'm about to put up in my work environment could offend anybody? Err on the side of caution. Not everybody is going to share your beliefs, your likes, your dislikes, your opinions. They're not going to have the same perception of what is an acceptable or unacceptable physical gesture. So just think before you do something. And then be professional. All right, your employer's responsibilities are to establish the policies or procedures, those should be in writing, to provide training, sort of like the same type of training that you got today, and then maintain zero tolerance. What does that mean? That means you have a policy or procedure that people feel comfortable enough to come through the appropriate channels to make a report of an incident, and that they know that once that report is made, that you are going to do everything you can to completely, accurately, discreetly investigate it. So you do have to have that system in play there. And then you need to provide immediate corrective action. Don't wait 2-3 months to do this. And retaliation is illegal. You can't demote someone. You can't zero in on that person. You cannot retaliate. All right, we're going to take the next couple of slides to go over a few scenarios, and normally I'll ask questions, but in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and walk through them myself, and if you have questions, please feel free, and Wendy can interrupt and let me know if anyone does have those questions. So we have an employee who filed a report of harassment with her supervisor, and after an investigation, her employer felt that it really wasn't harassment. Because the harassment was not found, the employee thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be disciplined. So are her worries founded? And actually, they should not be founded. An employee should not be disciplined or fearful of ever making a report. The term harassment in itself is a way to describe what you're feeling. So it's almost like an emotion. And as long as the employee isn't falsely accusing someone, that's a whole different story. If you are intentionally and falsely accusing someone of harassment to get them fired, that there can be consequences for, including termination. But if you actually honestly feel that you are being harassed, there should never be retaliation, even if the investigation concludes that at the end of the day, there really was no harassment. The employer still may want to try to work with the two individuals or however many individuals that involved to try to prevent it from happening in the future. All right, the next scenario is a supervisor receives a report of sexual harassment. The supervisor has seen such reports divide the workplace in the past. So what advice do you give the supervisor to help minimize disruption? Because this can cause, if there is an allegation, it can cause disruption in your workplace. So the answer to that is, number one, first and foremost, is you got to have that investigation done, and it needs to be done immediately and as discreetly as possible. So what you want to do is during the investigation, maybe gather your team, tell them that you are not going to accept any type of water cooler gossiping about the situation, advise the people that are involved not to discuss it, direct people back to work, try your best to keep up morale during the process. So you want to establish those expectations up front and make them very clear. The next scenario is an employee reports harassment to his or her supervisor and says, I don't want you to do anything about this. I just want you to listen and be aware of going on. And this happens quite often. People tend to just want to vent and have people hear them. How should the supervisor respond? Well, unfortunately, in this case, you can't just listen. A supervisor cannot make a promise to an employee that they will just listen and they won't take action, because once they have knowledge, they are held vicariously liable, meaning they have a duty, a legal duty, to investigate the incident and to bring it to resolution. So what should a supervisor do? A supervisor should say, look, I understand your concerns that you don't want this getting out, but I have a legal obligation, and of course we want this to clear up. If we don't do anything about it, it's going to continue. Therefore, we'll try to keep names out of it to the best of our ability, but I cannot guarantee you that. We will conduct an investigation, and we will be as discreet about that investigation as we possibly can. All right, and a report was made against an employee for harassment. How does the employer or supervisor or manager, how do you treat an accused employee of discrimination or harassment? Well, ever hear that phrase, you're innocent until proven guilty? That applies here. So nothing changes. It's business as usual. That person is innocent until the investigation is completed, and they should be treated with the same respect and professionalism that the accuser is being treated, that any other employee is being treated with, and to continue that investigation neutrally, again, without having any biased opinions until you have spoke to all of the witnesses and have all of your facts and your investigation is complete. All right, so we are going to throw up a couple questions, and I will ask that using your question feature, you either write a T for true or an F for false, and Wendy will let us know how we do. So for question number 1, discrimination, workplace harassment, and sexual harassment can be illegal behavior. True or false?
Okay, answers are coming in. We'll give it a second or two.
Perfect.
All right, so far all the answers say true.
That is great. Good job, guys. So that is absolutely true. The second question is, harassment is limited to exchanges between men and women. True or false?
All right, lots of answers coming in. Everyone agrees that that is false.
Good job. That is definitely false. As we mentioned in the beginning, it could be a woman against a man, or it could be same sex. Number 3, only a member of management has the power to eliminate discrimination and harassment in the workplace. What do you guys think? True or false?
Lots of answers coming in, and everyone agrees that is false.
And that is false. That's true. It is everybody's responsibility to try to eliminate this from the workplace. Question 4, if I tell my supervisor I'm being harassed, he or she can guarantee my name will be kept out of it. True or false?
Answers are coming in. We'll give it another second or two. All right, we have mostly false answers, but one true.
Okay, so again, you can never guarantee that the name will be kept out of it. The victim and the perpetrator definitely has a right to know who is accusing them. So there's a possibility that you may have to bring up someone's name. What you can do, the only thing you can guarantee is that as an employer, you will conduct the investigation as discreetly as possible. Number 5, prevention is the most effective way to eliminate discrimination and harassment in the workplace. True or false?
Okay, answers are coming in. We'll give it another second or two. And so far, everyone agrees that's true.
That is perfect. Yeah, so that is the whole theme of today was proactive prevention. We don't want to wait to test it with the courts to find out whether or not it was harassment or not. We just want to err again on the side of caution, be a little bit more conservative. If you even have a doubt in your mind, err towards conservative, keep it out of the workplace. Perfect. So what have you learned today? The first thing is that discrimination, harassment, and even bullying, because we don't know when that bill can become law, should not be tolerated in your workplace. Just it comes down to respect. Be respectful to others in the workplace. Remember that we all have many, many differences as many different topics, religion, politics, it can go on and on and on. There are that many different opinions about each of those topics. So sometimes it's just best not to discuss them or talk about them or bring them into the workplace. Put the filter on before you speak. Know your company's policies regarding discrimination and harassment. It should be in your company's handbook. It's a good idea if you are in the HR field. Most of you, have a lot of resources and outlets for updating, but bring it up to date and start taking a look at inserting that verbiage for bullying, because, that does look like in the near future that could become law. And last, promptly report it. If you see something, say something. Even if it doesn't directly affect you, if you see that someone's being harassed, but they're just afraid to speak up for themselves, speak up for them. Make sure that you promptly report. And employers, please do not discriminate, do not retaliate for reports of harassment. All right. So that kind of concludes our presentation. Brown & Brown will be at the 2019 PHCA Assisted Living and Personal Care Summit, which is occurring on Thursday, March 21st. We hope to see you guys all at the Radisson Hotel. I know that Kim Nash, who works out of our Mechanicsville Brown & Brown office, she is a great expert in human resources, and that she is having a session at this particular association meeting. Erica Ford from Brown & Brown will also be out there. I believe that we might have a booth, so we look forward to seeing you out there. I'm going to kind of stay on the line, just kind of stay quiet. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. Wendy will announce them on the line, and I'll answer them as they come in. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining the PHCA and Brown & Brown.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. That was great information today. I know I learned something, and I'll be talking to our human resources. We just rolled out a new employee handbook, and I don't remember if the bullying was addressed in there, but I'm going to certainly talk to them about that and make some suggestions there. So thank you. I learned something as well.
Perfect.
So we have time for a couple questions. We're a couple minutes before the hour, so if anyone does have any questions, please type those in for us, and we'll be happy to answer them. I will be sending out the email later today with the information on how to get in touch with Lisa if you have any questions that you want to follow up with her on. And like Lisa said, Brown & Brown will have a session at the upcoming March 21st Assisted Living and Personal Care Summit. We have 6 credits offered at that summit, and Lisa's colleague, Kim Nash, will be presenting on conflict resolution. So I think that's going to be a great session, and we're looking forward to seeing a lot of people. There's still plenty of time to sign up. The hotel to make your reservations for hotel deadline is coming up next week. So if you are thinking about it, get those reservations made before March 5th. All right, well, I don't see any questions, but again, want to thank Lisa for her time today and for the great information that she shared with all of us. And thanks. Look for more webinars that will be posted soon on the PHCA website and through our communications. There'll be more in the works here, and we'll get those out so that you can sign up soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.